In a galaxy far, far away, lawlessness and war can break out amongst the stars just as easily as it can surface on any world. And just like on the ground, it is up to the Jedi to rise to the occasion to defend the weak. But while lightsabers are their weapon of choice on solid terrain, things are a bit more complicated above the atmosphere. The lightsaber is a unique weapon that indicate Jedi authority, and the very sight of a lightsaber can force a surrender out of nearly any enemy. But in space, without their signature weapons visible, how did the Jedi lay down the law? This question is what led the Jedi and the Republic to develop the unique starships specifically designed for the Jedi Order. It came to be that a Jedi ace climbing into the cockpit was just as significant as a Jedi Guardian was igniting their lightsaber. And in today's holocron, we are going to be taking a flight through the history of Jedi Starfighters. We shall begin with the primitive vessels from the very inception of their order, and ending off with the highly advanced strikers utilized by Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy. But before we initiate our takeoff sequences, our scanners have been picking up some anomalies. Many of you who are watching have not yet subscribed. We are always looking to explore new topics in the archives here, and we need new perspectives on things in order to analyze that. So calibrate your targeting computer and blast that subscribe button, and let us know what other topics you would like to see explored. Now, lock S-foils in attack position, because now we begin. Our last holocron was about the vessels of the ancient Sith. In that video, we focused a lot more on the capital ships, since that is where the Sith put the majority of their resources and power. The Sith, though, had the repeated issue of placing all of their industry into one big dreadnought and then neglecting the other starfighter corps. The Jedi, though, had the exact opposite problem. They almost exclusively focused on developing starfighters and light corvettes and neglected any sort of large carriers. This of course makes more sense for the Jedi since they aren't militaristic, and attempt to focus more on diplomacy. Anytime the Jedi were to make use of their larger capital ships, they were usually provided by the Republic. For today though, we are more interested in talking about the Jedi-specific technology rather than the Republic's. But of course, while there is a little overlap since the Republic was involved with many of these designs, we are focusing mainly on the starfighters the Jedi used throughout their history. And to do that, we are going to start from the very beginning. The ancient Jedi Order developed their own technology for keeping the peace in the Tythos system thousands of years ago. The masters of the Vertep Forge together would work with the scientists of Anil Kash to develop two main ships that were utilized by the Order of this day. These ships would be chosen by a Jedi when they were promoted to the rank of a Jedi Ranger. The first was the Peacemaker-class cruiser. This was primarily used for interstellar travel between systems for the purpose of diplomatic missions or for other interventions. The Peacemakers existed prior to the advent of hyperspace travel, and were capable of slower than light speed journeys between local planets. Their armaments were also very light, keeping basic armaments on the starboard side, mainly in the form of laser cannons and port sides of the bow, and one rotary cannon on the dorsal. These were to be utilized mainly for defense of this era though, or if aggressive negotiations were required, they could be used offensively. Peacemakers were spacious ships, and preferred by rangers that spent more time planet hopping and meditating on various systems. Many of them would be heavily modified, essentially becoming a mobile apartment for many Jedi Rangers. Any personal effects, including their bed, wardrobe, training gear, droids, alchemical equipment, basically everything was kept within this cabin. The second, though, was the first starship developed for the Order, the Hunter-class starfighter. This was a small but a heavily armored fighter specifically engineered for dogfighting. While it was capable of interplanetary travel on its own, this was unpreferred since the cockpits were actually quite small. At the time where it saw the most use though, was around 25,780 BBY. At the time it was considered the fastest and the most maneuverable ship in all of existence. This display of the current ideology of the Order fit it back in the day, as they were less concerned with relying on soul negotiations and would readily raise arms against any threat. They wouldn't lean to prioritize peaceful resolutions until well after they moved to the world of Ossus. For now, while they were not considered to be militant, the Jedi had absolutely no problem with eradicating a foe that threatened the balance of the Force. So the Hunter-class fighter maintained a fierce reputation during the Great Despot War and the subsequent invasion of the Tythos system by the Rakata and the Infinite Empire. The last time the Hunter saw combat was during the invasion of Tython, where the Jedi savagely fought off the ravenous Rakatans. During that war, the balance of the Force was shifted, and the Jedi began giving into their darker tendencies more and more. Each shot from their starfighter was not aimed to simply cripple, but to kill on sight. They even began shouting in joy and victory each time they shredded Rakatan starfighters. It was after this war that the Jedi Order apparently had to stop using the Hunters, along with the Force Sabers, which had begun to bring them closer to the dark side. During the Force Wars, which was officially transitioning the Jedi into the Jedi, it didn't seem as though they used starfighters at all in this period, but had most of their fighting happen on the ground. This would cause the balance of Tython to shift, resulting in a storm of violence that would render the world uninhabitable. Once the Jedi moved to Ossus, they reorganized, and they wouldn't use starfighters for a very long time, at least 20 millennia. During this time, they allowed the Republic Navy to do much of their fighting, and if the Jedi took to the skies, they likely utilized the Republic-provided starcrafts. The Jedi wouldn't really fixate on a particular model of starfighter until the year 3997 BBY, the time of the Great Sith Wars and Exar Kun. In this day, the Jedi were selected by the Republic to test out their new model of starfighter, the Star Saber XC1. This was a long and a sleek needle-shaped craft with wings almost resembling that of an X-wing, the exception being that there were only 2 wings and not 4. They possessed hyperdrives, deflector shields, and were armed with heavier blaster cannons mounted on each wing. Not to mention it held a week's worth of rations. Quickly it became the preferred craft by most Jedi. However, it was not without its issues. While it could accelerate to top speeds in mere seconds, the craft possessed very poor maneuverability. This, combined with their slower control stick reaction, made them rather ungainly to use. The Jedi would have to use their force senses and their precognitive abilities to actually accurately predict when to use the control stick, due to the incredibly low maneuverability to speed ratio of the vessel. Although inefficient, the design was quickly rushed into production at the onset of the Krath Holy Crusade, which led directly into the Great Sith Wars. The design was never perfected, making it difficult to use during this war, and it is likely the reason behind why a lot of the Republic were being defeated. Only the Jedi could use the Force to compensate for the fighter shortcomings of this era, and the Star Saber would be used for about 20 years before it was thankfully retired in favor of a new design for the Republic fleet systems. In 3976 BBY, introduced the Actis-class tactical strike fighter. This is like the Star Saber, but was not Jedi specific, but largely Jedi favored. The A-Wing was a hit in the Order, and became the primary starfighter used throughout the Mandalorian Wars, the Jedi Civil War, the Great Galactic War, and the New Sith Wars. The design lasted for thousands of years and stuck around, and was upgraded from one era to the next to keep it relevant. It was much smaller than its predecessor, only being about 9.2 meters in comparison with the 13-meter Star Saber. It was shaped like an arrowhead, and had 2 maneuverable wings which were angled in the back. These wings allowed the fighter to be capable of considerable acceleration and maneuverability. Despite their size, they were equipped with a hyperdrive, deflector shields, and boasted heavy laser cannons and proton torpedo launchers as well. However, all of these benefits did come at a pretty big cost. They were by far one of the most expensive ships of the era, purchasing in it at an estimate of 360,000 credits, more than twice what a Star Saber would have cost, which were 145,000, and it remains one of the most expensive Republic starfighters ever made, beaten out only by the high-speed variant of the Delta 7 Interceptor. Despite all of this though, the Jedi and the Republic were not afraid to mass-produce them. The ships were so effective and self-sufficient that the Jedi practically ensured that they remained in production, and were continually improved from each and every era. During the Great Galactic War, the Jedi returned to offering their knights specialized ships for long-range diplomacy and intervention. But in a time of severe war, not only would this vessel need to be self-sustaining, but also heavily armed to defend against the Sith. Enter the Defender-class light corvette, produced by the Rendili Vehicle Corporation in the year 3660 BBY. This was one of the first Jedi-exclusive ships not available to the Republic or sold on any public market. The ship was a model to be specifically used for the Jedi, and to serve as a mobile operations base, and even a starfighter when necessary. The corvette could be flown by a single pilot, and it was equipped with heavy shielding, 2 sets of dual laser cannons and missiles. The ship's interior was laid out over 2 decks, and several amenities which included a secure holo terminal, a transceiver, and even a conference room, along with multiple passenger cabins and a medbay. The Defender class saw use by the Jedi throughout the Cold War and the Galactic War, and several of the Order's greatest heroes would fly the Defender class corvettes on their adventures across the stars. Because of the importance this ship carried, it was almost a luxurious experience for the Jedi to have one. It would even include a C2N2 Factomium droid to serve as the vessel's steward and ensure that it remained in good condition. After the new Sith Wars though, the Republic was facing an economic crisis and had to reform their entire economy in order to not implode. This would come first at the sacrifice of the beloved class Tactical Strike Fighter and the Defender class Light Corvette. To replace them, the Jedi had to accept the Savage Starfighter instead. The Savage Starfighter was the ship that replaced the one known as the Kuat Redshift, but unfortunately our knowledge on this ship is very limited. All we know is that the Savage ship was basically way better. The Savage is first told to us by the Jedi ace Crix Sunburis in the book The Jedi Path. This ship was fitted with twin laser cannons and deflector shields. With that said though, they did not have the other advantages of the Actis-class such as a hyperdrive. Instead it relied on the use of a hyperdrive sled attachment, which was the precursor to the hyperspace rings that we see during the Clone Wars era. Following this though, was another rather boring ship known as the White Cloak Fighter. These were simply modified cloak-shaped fighters made by the Republic. These starfighters were not considered particularly agile or powerful when they were first made. However, they had a reinforced hull and were quite durable, and overall, they were generally considered adequate for their class. To differentiate them in battle, the Jedi painted them white, which gave them their very names. They were modestly equipped with light laser cannons and concussive missile launchers. It was a very bare-bones ship that the Jedi made of use before they got their own dedicated ships closer to the Clone Wars era. But now guys, let's kick things into gear when the Jedi received the Delta 6 Sprite-class Starfighter. This ship was designed by the Kuat Systems Engineering at the behest of the Jedi who had missed the A-Wing. As such, this design was inspired by it, and included the arrowhead shape as well. It can be distinguished from its successor, the Delta 7, by the fact that the 6 usually was painted bronze and silver, and did not include an astromech droid. It was fast but lightly armed, and meant to be a short-range snub fighter. It was originally designed by a man named Waylex Blissex, who worked for Kuat Systems Engineering, but later became a general in the Rebel Alliance. The evolution of this ship would be the famous Delta 7 Ether Sprite class light interceptor, but because of its extensive use by the Jedi, it would eventually come to be known as the Jedi Starfighter. It was considered highly advanced at the time of its creation, and its equipment was quite sophisticated. Due to limitations in technology at the time of its creation though, the Starfighter's size did not allow for a built-in hyperdrive, and instead, it had to rely on other spacecrafts or external hyperdrive docking rings in order to help. But it was still loved by the Jedi for its effectiveness on reconnaissance missions specifically. But what made the ship so unique was it included an astromech droid unit. What's interesting though, is the Delta 7 early models did not have the astromech socket, but instead had droids which were integrated directly into the Starfighter itself. Later though, the newer version known as the Delta 7B allowed for an astromech to connect and disconnect at will. The ship was also armed with 2 twin laser cannons, though later models would be modified by Master Seisei Tin to contain 4 quad-pulse laser cannons hidden beneath the breakaway panels. While it was the preferred model because of its advancement, the Delta was quite expensive. At a base price, it was around 185,000 credits, but other variants would increase the price depending on the upgrades. The high maneuver model rose to 210,000 credits, and the high-speed variant would surpass the A-Wing even in being the most expensive starfighter ever produced by the Republic, at a whopping 385,000 credits. In the time of peace that came just before the Clone Wars, the Delta 7 was the go-to starfighter for every Jedi. While it was also used by Republic personnel, it soon became distinguished as a Jedi vessel. It was used widely during diplomatic missions, allowing for its distinct shape to be recognized by nearly any system. Along with this, the Jedi painted their starfighters with the red and white. This signified diplomatic immunity under the Republic's jurisdiction, although as the Clone Wars ignited, the colors of the Delta 7 would change since diplomatic immunity meant little in the heat of combat. Towards the end of the Clone Wars, another ship would end up taking the name of the Jedi Starfighter, that being the highly advanced ETA-2 Actis-class interceptor. Once again designed by Waylex Blissex, he outdid himself with this design, making it even smaller than the already short Delta 7. The former was 8 meters in length, while the ETA-2 was only 5.72 meters. The new Starfighter's mass was further reduced by moving much of the forward space frame, leaving the front of the ship in a forked shape. Like its predecessor, it was also too small to hold an onboard hyperdrive. However, all models of the ship had a full astromech droid socket already attached. Due to the era in which it was produced though, the ship was largely designed with combat in mind. It showed as much with the inclusion of the S-foils on the wings as well. S-foils had been developed to address overheating issues on wing-based starfighters, because of the proximity of engines and the weapon systems to narrow wiring that fit inside of the thin wings. An excess of heat could cause mechanical meltdowns that would be devastating to a fighter's capacity to function. S-foils on the ETA-2 held radiator panels that dispersed heat and cooled the ship's interior mechanisms swiftly. These were usually open when stress was being put on the ship's systems, usually when it was traveling at high speeds or locked into a dogfight. This revolutionized how starfighters were manufactured in this era, making them way more efficient than any generation before. This system was also included in the clone ARC 170 fighters. The requirement of the S-foils came because the ETA-2 Actis-class interceptor had much more firepower than any before it. It was equipped with laser cannons and secondary ion cannons. In some models, it also included concussive missile launchers. Its speed and maneuverability were attributed to one of the first appearances of the twin ion engine system developed by Whitesand. This was the same propulsive system later used in the TIE fighters, making the ETA-2 one of the fastest ships in the galaxy at this point. This, however, came at the cost of deflector shields, as it was thought that their agility would serve as their primary defense. But it also had another downside. It would surpass the Delta 7 in price, with the standard model being a whopping 290,000 credits. However, none of the ETA-2's variants surpassed the Delta 7 high-speed model's price tag of 385. But of course, with Order 66 and the rise of the Empire, we didn't see any Jedi-specific starfighters in this era for a very long time. All of them were junked and put out of commission. Eventually, newer starfighters took center stage, and rendered even the best of the Clone Wars machines obsolete. The X-Wing, for instance, may be considered one of the finest starfighters ever produced. Luke Skywalker certainly thought so. This is why he personally tweaked the design of the X-Wing to create the signature ship used by the Jedi Order in the later years. The latest and the final Jedi-specific starfighter that we would like to explore would be the Stealth X. This was the variant of the already formidable T-65XJ2 X-Wing, which was the latest and the most powerful version that the New Republic had made. Luke would take it a step further. He would slightly reduce the size and give it equipment that hid the craft both visually and from energy sensors as well. Not only this though, but even when the cloaking device was inactive, the Stealth X had a star-flecked body of irregular, matte black fiber plants that rendered it almost invisible against a background of stars. And along with this, the ship included a gravitic modulator, which was a device that could alter the gravity within the immediate area of the starfighter. This was used as a countermeasure against mass detectors, which were made to specifically locate the Stealth X fighters. While the shields had been downgraded to make use of the cloaking device though, the fiberplast hull was the finest material for shipbuilding technology in the entire galaxy. And for its speed, it was so fast that it had to burn a specific type of fuel known as Tibana X, which was developed uniquely for this starcraft. But its armament is what made it truly terrifying and legendary. Being a ship developed during wartime with the Yuzhong Vong, Luke Skywalker did not pull any punches with its firepower. Along with the standard 4 laser cannons and the 2 proton torpedo launchers, it was sometimes equipped with custom-made Jedi weapons, such as the Jedi Shadow Bombs. These bombs were essentially proton torpedoes with the guidance package and propellant fuel replaced by packed beryllium, which was the explosive material used in thermal detonators. Basically, they took out all of the electronic guts of a normal proton torpedo and packed it with even more explosives. Now, instead of locking onto a target and firing like a normal torpedo would, the Jedi guided the shadow bomb with the Force themselves to propel the bomb into an enemy ship. The extra explosives stored within each missile vastly increased their individual destructive power. A pair of well-placed shadow bombs could cleave a Yuzhong Vong corvette in half. This had been developed in response to the artificial gravitational generators that the Vong had used to throw off the tracking of typical proton torpedoes. Along with the Jedi Shadow Bombs though, the Stealth X's could also be equipped with Glop bombs, which spread a quick hardening foam upon detonation, and Bunker Buster bombs as well, which were armor-piercing rounds meant for tough fortifications. The Stealth X was used exclusively by the Jedi, as the restrictions on common usage made it nearly impossible for anyone other than a Jedi to coordinate with all of the forces that it took. Along with this, the ships were equipped with the highly advanced R9 series astromech droid. Droids developed specifically with the Stealth X in mind. Luke truly created a starfighter worthy of a Jedi, and undoubtedly the most advanced model that the Order has ever seen by far. But from the ancients of the Hunter class to the futuristic Stealth X's, This was a timeline of the Jedi Order Starfighters. This was definitely a new format from which showcasing the Jedi's evolution throughout the eons in a different perspective, their ships. Their ever-changing requirements showed their exact mindset for each era. For us, it's really interesting how something like a starship design can speak so loudly of the Order's state of mind in that era, the Republic's state of stability, and their constantly shifting priorities. But anyway, my friends, what do you think about all of this? Would you like to see more holocrons exploring the meanings behind the different ships in the galaxy far, far away? Let us know if you want more in the comments down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.